Hello there, my name is Dr. Salim Javed. I'm an associate professor at the Department of Journalism and Mass Communication at India's Lalita Devi Institute of Management and Sciences affiliated with Guru Gobind Singh Indraprastha University. We have been talking about the beginning of cinema, how cinema took its modern shape, what has been the journey, and how the nature of the film, as we have been seeing them for a long time, has changed over the years. In this lecture, we are going to talk about Société Film d'Art and the Italian super spectacle cinema. Now, as I said that in this lecture we are going to talk about Société Film d'Art. Now, the actual pronunciation of this word is Société Film d'Art, which is, as you can see on your screen, it's SOCIETA, and its sticks are there, and Film d'Art. So this is Société Film d'Art. It is one of the movements in French cinema where a lot of people have a lot of misconception about this particular style of filmmaking. Now, this has been one of the most significant event in French cinema during the first decade of the last century. What it has that makes it special, or there are a lot of critique who do not like this style of filmmaking. So this lecture is about what are the positive and negative aspect of this particular, not exactly a film movement, but it has been a style of filmmaking for limited years in the beginning of the last century. Now, the most significant event in the cinema during the era of worldwide, the growth occurred in the initial decade. If you remember, we talked about Georges Méliès, then we talked about different people associated with Georges Méliès, we talked about Gaimont, we talked about Pathé. So we have been talking about a lot of things, and interestingly, all these initial developments are related with the French cinema. So one can say that French cinema, when filmmaking itself started, was extremely active through its people, through its movement. So technically, Société Film d'Art is one of the first style of filmmaking. When we'll be talking about German cinema, when we'll be talking about Russian cinema, when we'll be talking again, we will be talking about Godard, Truffaut, and all of the people. And then we will be talking about Hollywood also. Then we'll talk about Indian cinema, Japanese cinema, Korean cinema, Tamil cinema, Telugu, Malayalam, Kannada cinema. But initially, if you look at, it is France or French cinema was into a lot of experimentation from the very beginning of the craft. Now, when we talked, if you remember, we have been talking about Georges Méliès, we have been talking about Pathé, we have been talking about Gaimont, and this particular style of filmmaking, Société Film d'Art or Société Film d'Art, society of film, which was related to art, so Société Film d'Art. Pathé had some stake in it, there was no doubt. So the Société Film d'Art established by the Parisian, the spelling is not Persian, it's Parisian investor Frère Laffitte in 1908, aimed to adapt esteemed theatrical plays to the cinema using renowned actors. Now, this is something which, if you have been following this particular series closely, then you remember that when I was talking about, or when I was explaining about Georges Méliès, I talked about the tabloid or tableau mentality. Now, what it is, you will get to see. But when we talk about Société Film d'Art, it means we are talking about obviously Laffitte, Frère Laffitte, we are talking about, who started in 1908, and the aim of this particular style, I would not call it a movement. Some people consider it as one of the first movements, cinema movements, but let's take it that it is one of the early styles, because then if you take it as one of the movements, then D.W. Griffith, and then Soviet montage. So there is one more addition into that. But let's take it as a style. What this style was all about, it adapted esteemed theatrical plays to the cinema. Now, if you remember this particular, these 4 5 words, that Société Film de Art adapted esteemed theatrical plays to the cinema, then it is easy to understand why they were doing as they did. What was the criticism, what was good about this, what was not so good about this, why it, how it is very much close to what Bhatvadekar was doing in India, how it is very close to like recording the actualities. So you really have to remember, when throughout the lecture you really have to keep this particular element in mind, that it was the adaptation of esteemed theatrical plays to the cinema, and obviously for the purpose of theatrical performance to be shown in cinema hall. So this has to be remembered. Now, a lot of students usually say, sir, if it was esteemed theatrical performances, then what is the need to show, or what was the initial need to record it or show it in the cinema hall? Now, one very precise and very powerful thing about cinema is that you can record anything for posterity. You can record anything for coming generations. So, Frere Lafayette, who actually technically is called someone who started it, or rather the investor of in this, the early investor in this style, he knew that once time passes, lot of good things may fade away. So the intention was really good. So it is good that as the performance is going on, and it is not, they were not simply recording the performance. Please understand this. They were not simply recording the performance. I'll be telling you what are the changes they made when they were recording the performance. But obviously, when it comes to cinema per se, cinema requires a lot of other things also, and they were very stick in their tableau mentality. So from there the criticism comes. So remember this, that they were adapting esteemed theatrical plays to record through camera for the purpose of cinema. But when it comes from but when cinema fraternity comes, they do not take it in a very good taste. Now, the objective was to entice. Now, these are the things very important. The objective was to entice the theatre attending middle class. Please underline middle class. I mean, in the mind of the viewers. So, theatre attending middle class to the cinema by enhancing its aesthetic and intellectual allure, a groundbreaking concept during an era when the medium had recently transitioned from the Nickelodeon and the fairground tent. Now, if there are a lot of critics who have written in favor of Société Film de Art, rather lot of film critics, those who got a legitimacy in 1960s and 70s, wrote extensively about it. Now, what it is saying, that still it is not niche. It is not for the niche audience. They are still targeting the middle class. Now that middle class has got a sensibility that they are a theatre attending middle class. Now look how educated that middle class must have been, that they have been a theatre attending middle class. Now obviously there are fairgrounds, there are Nickelodeons, and we have talked extensively about Nickelodeon and what were the things that were happening in the fairground. George Millier, transitioned from there, from fairground, and then he got into cinema. So, middle class has a taste, and they were in a habit of going to attend wonderful performances in theaters. So, if you remember, I talked about Frere Lafayette, who was a Parisian investor, Persian investor, obviously, one of the earliest investor in the in this style. So he knew that I have already established market. Now this new craft has come, which is called filmmaking. Now he was smart enough to mix these two and form a new style known as Société Film de Art. Now, what they were enhancing through cinema or through camera per se, they were enhancing its aesthetical and intellectual allure. Now, at a time, even George Méliès, look at George Méliès, he is involved into trick photography, A Trip to the Moon, A Trip to the Sun, and a lot of other films. Now, nobody is talking, I mean, they are intellectual, yes, but aesthetic. Now, this groundbreaking concept, is was a medium. Technically, it was a medium when they could provide an alternative, not only to somebody who is interested in trick photography or watching films like that, or at the first decade of the last century was absolutely mesmerized by George Méliès, but for the first time this particular style offers something different than George Méliès. So that's why a lot of people praise it. That when the entire world up to the First World War was in the grip of Pathé, Gaimont, George Méliès itself, there was an alternative available. How successful was it? How not it was? That is a different debate altogether. But there was an alternative, and what that alternative was catering to? That alternative was catering to theatre attending middle class and providing them an alternative which was an enhanced version of aesthetic and intellectual allure, and which was able to give them a third or fourth dimension, technically, from Nickelodeon to Fairground to trick photography to actuality, and then you have this particular thing called Société Film de Art. Now, to an extent, that film historian Kenneth Magon referred to film de art or Société Film de Art as the first intellectual motion picture movement. That is what I told you in the beginning of the lecture, that a lot of people consider it as the first motion picture movement or first cinema movement, but there is a bunch of critique who do not take it as a first motion picture movement. But what makes Kenneth's statement different, that he calls it the first intellectual motion picture movement. And intellectual, why it is called intellectual, I told you that Frere Lafite was smart enough to invest in the combination of theatre attending. I mean, he was smart enough to mix theatre attending middle class and inviting them to cinema halls, which was like which have witnessed a journey from Nickelodeon to Fairgrounds. So Kenneth Magon was the first one who calls it an intellectual motion picture movement, and a characteristics that hold true in both its favorable and unfavorable connotation. Now, this is something very interesting, that he himself is calling it favorable, and I mean his comment is favorable for Société Film de Art or Société Film de Art, but at the same time it is unfavorable also. So we will be understanding why it is favorable from one standpoint and why it is unfavorable for many people. Now, what makes Société Film de Art so unique? Now, if you can see on your screen, it says beautifully, the company engaged the finest creative talent of the era to produce its works, commissioning original plays from members of the prestigious Académie Francoise and recruiting prominent actors from the Comédie Francoise, renowned composers created original music for these plays, and distinguished stage directors were engaged to conduct them. Now, think of an opera, grand opera, a grand performance, where you have invited a lot of people who is who from the business. They come together to produce something which is bringing up original plays, who has been recognized as a piece of literature. And whom are you assigning it to? Creative talents and people from many people who were prominent actors of that time, not necessarily from cinema, from stage itself. They are bringing composers, they are creating original music for these plays, obviously the plays which will be recorded from a static point of view. And who are directing them? Distinguished stage directors. D.W. Griffith is yet to, technically is yet to be recognized. Only one person in market, technically in France, Georges Méliès. And then in America, obviously you have Great Train Robbery and things, other things going on. But here, imagine the world where an investor brings together the best people from theater or stage, putting a best show, recording it, and giving the best quality to its audience. And obviously, one of the audiences is a camera also. And that camera will take this particular performance, which has recorded the play, to different parts of the world. Look at the grandeur. Look at the overall atmosphere that has been created. Original plays, prominent actors, original music, great composers, great directors. That makes it favorable. You may criticize it in 2026 today, but imagine this being happening in 1908, 1909, 1910, 1911. People going berserk, to watch, and the facility was that they could watch it again also. So that was the concept. Brilliant people coming together to put up original plays in best possible conditions. There were attendees, audience, full theater, and one of the audience was camera. And this is how you and I know this. Now, from a literary and dramatic standpoint, the credentials of Film de Art were indeed flawless, as I was telling you. From a cinematic perspective, however, the Film de Art productions were exceedingly regressive. Now, this is the criticism that I was talking about. I mean, for last 10 minutes, I've been talking about how brilliant it has been, what it has been, what it has done, what it has achieved, how it has done, how it has achieved. So it is saying from dramatic and from literary standpoint, it has been a flawless take on cinema. But when we come to the other side, which is like the cinematic perspective, they, whosoever represents cinema perspective, they completely abhor it. They completely consider film the art style of filmmaking, or so-called the first intellectual cinematic movement in the history of cinema, exceedingly regressive. Now, why this is considered extreme, exceedingly regressive? Now let's try to understand this also, and it is up to you whether you find it progressive from that point of time, or considering that it is one very unique style of making film, or it is up to you whether you like it or you abhor it. Choice is absolutely yours. That is the best point, knowing about the history of your craft, that you can love it, hate it, but when you read it, then you create your own standpoint. Now, despite its intellectual lineage, the opulent productions of Société Film des Arts were essentially filmed plays, with directors making no concessions to the cinematic medium. Now, this is, I think, one of the rather the only criticism, but the legitimate criticism. Now, nobody technically, if I take a very objective stand, now nobody said that you should record plays, but somebody thought about it, so they did. Now, nobody said that you put up best people in the craft and put together and record it, but somebody did. Now, they are saying that though it has a very powerful background or intellectual lineage, but when it comes to cinema, you know, they were only filmed plays. And whosoever was recording it, or whatsoever idea was there to conceive it, and whosoever conceived this idea, he or she, today we can say he or she, at that point of time it was only he. So, he or she made no concessions to the cinematic medium. Now, this is something which need to be understood. Now, similar to a theatrical patron in an orchestra seat. Now, imagine this that I am reading. Similar to a theatrical patron in an orchestra seat, the camera maintained a central position relative to the action and remained immobile, allowing the film frame to function as a proscenium arch. All shots were either long or medium long, allowing the athletes to be fully visible on screen as they appear on stage. Now, this is an overall technical standpoint of Société Film des Arts, or you can say the theatrical or technical base of Société Film des Arts. Now, what it says, that the performance is going on, uh, action is happening, camera is stationed like one of the audiences. Either that person or that camera is looking at the performer or the athletes, the word has been used as athletes, either in long shot or maximum in medium long shot. Now, long shot, because you are very far from the stage, so that becomes obviously a long shot, and then medium long shot maybe when you are close to the stage. But obviously, the camera is put in the center. Uh, After the calculation, the camera is put in the center. The view is absolutely clear. You know where your theatre. So it is a big, long shot where everything is happening within the frame. So you also have to get the frame of the stage also. So you know that what is happening there. You know what is exactly going on there. So when you talk about Société Film des Arts, these are the things that there are some people who liked it, and there are some people who said this is not cinema. But obviously, whether you like it or you don't like it, you love it or you abhor it, it is part of the cinema. We'll be talking about it. Thank you.